My name is Elena Sokova. I'm the Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. And on behalf of the Center, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency. At the onset of the quarantine and the various restrictions it brought with it, including on travel, there were voices of concern about the uninterrupted implementation of the IAEA safeguards. Today, we have a unique opportunity to hear firsthand from the IAEA Director General, Rafael Mariano Grossi, about the challenges that the agency faced in ensuring the continued implementation of inspections and other essential programs and activities of the agency. It is also important to note that the agency contributed to the mitigation of the virus, including by providing diagnostics equipment, testing equipment, the protection equipment, and other assistance to the member states. In both of these tracks, coordination and cooperation with member states were vital. And the agency enjoyed a very strong support from its member states, and not only financial. The agency was also able to provide COVID-19 assistance to a large number of states. So in this regard, I thought we, in addition to the Director General Grossi, we invited 2 ambassadors representing their countries to the IAEA, Ambassador Maria Cleofe Natividad of the Republic of Philippines and Ambassador David Hall of the United Kingdom, to provide their views and testimonies on their interaction with the agency during this trying period. It is my greatest pleasure to invite Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, to give his remarks. Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you very much, Elena. It's very good to see you and to be working with you, with VCDNP again, and also be able to reach a very significant, I would say, number of participants, as you were just announcing a few seconds ago. I think it's important to see that people are indeed interested in what we are doing at the agency at these crucial times, in many respects that we might be able to analyze and discuss about in the course of our conversation today. Let me say that the theme that you've chosen is how we as agency were able to operate and work in these circumstances, in these extraordinary circumstances, in the middle of a crisis that is still ongoing. We are not, unfortunately, we're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel yet. We are and must be optimistic, but we are concerned because of what's going on in the world. At the very beginning of this phenomenon, 2 questions came immediately to my mind and to our minds, and they had to do with our mission. We saw a world that was gradually closing down. We saw a world where all of a sudden, and I'm stating the obvious because this affects our own lives, all of our assumptions were no longer valid, and we would have to reevaluate how we did things, from seeing our friends and loved ones to sending our kids to school, and of course also how to lead an international organization like this one, which, unlike other organizations that have very noble goals as well as ours, but our organization, as you know very well, has a very specific feature in it, in that it requires, in order to fulfill its mandate, it requires the physical presence of our personnel. and I'm not thinking solely or specifically about nuclear inspections. So confronted with this unusual, with this quite spectacular circumstances and environment, from day one, I said two things. One was that our inspection work would not stop for a single minute. This was important because it was not to be taken for granted. Like I said, in a world that was closing down, where commercial air flight and routes were no longer available for the most part, and where other international inspectorates decided immediately to suspend their activities. Immediately. Confronted with this, I came to the conclusion that when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation, stopping the work is not in the cards. It's not an option. It's not a possibility, lest you increase the fragility of a world already under incredible pressure because of a pandemic. It is obvious to say that in those circumstances, and had we decided to put on hold, suspend, or otherwise our inspections, possibilities could have arisen to proliferators, or it would have been, without that scenario, it would have been more difficult for us to continue the chain of knowledge that we require to have over nuclear material all over the world. So this required, this of course did not depend on my own will. I could have that conviction. I can come out, as I try to do in Twitters and here and there, say, we are not stopping. Okay, very fine, very nice, very good. The thing is that we were confronted with flight restrictions, with travel across straight border restrictions, to in-country restrictions, to access restrictions to agency, to offices and laboratories, access restrictions to state facilities and sites, and of course, health and safety requirements and concerns for our own inspectors. So that was a quite, I would say, a sobering list of things that we had to circumvent if we wanted to make or make true of my words that we would not be suspending our activities. I started by addressing my counterparts, the governors. Immediately as this started, I wrote to them saying, reminding them that in spite of the problem that we all had, I would need their help, their assistance in communicating to governments and facilitating the access of our experts, which was not so easy because even, and I have a number of anecdotes to illustrate that, even with the best of intentions, the national bureaucracies themselves were living something completely new that they didn't know. And under fear, under political pressure, under social discontent. So that required, on many occasions, strong political decision-making from very often, as it is evident, from heads of state that were and are deeply involved in this. So in some cases, I remember being told by officials that it was absolutely out of the question to allow nuclear inspectors where the president had decided that the country was in lockdown and no foreigners will be admitted or things like that. So you can imagine what it took for us to maintain this dialogue and in some cases quite robust conversations make the point that safeguards, commitments, and obligations are not suspended because of a pandemic, that we have to work around the pandemic. So that was, I would say, extremely complicated. It still is, I must say, because this continues, and unfortunately, as the figures tell us every day, the situation will most probably continue to expose all of us to these restrictions. So these problems will continue. And it has happened to us that in some cases, states tell us, okay, I let you today, but please go away and don't come back until there is a vaccine, or things like that. So that was incredibly difficult, and it still is. But I must say that, much to the credit of our inspectorate, during the period, let me give you a figure so you have an idea. During the period between the 1st of March and 31st of May 2020, the agency conducted 274 inspections, 29 design information verification, and 16 complementary accesses. That means more than one activity a day in the field. So this required all of this political conversation, legal negotiation, and also alternative means of transportation. For the first time in the history of the IAEA, we had to contract the services of charter flights, which was made possible through a combination of factors. On the one hand, the generosity of some of our member states who provided funds for this, because I don't have the money to do this in my regular budget. And as anybody can know or guess, private flight maybe too easy for billionaires and Hollywood stars or football stars, but not for IAEA inspectors. So we had to go out in the market and try to secure this, and also negotiate overflight permits, special authorizations. And I must say, and pay tribute, as I did to Foreign Minister Schallenberg here in Austria, I got the full support of himself and his services. I spoke with him early on, telling him that we would have to have these private flights in many cases to risk destinations in terms of COVID, which was an additional thing, because to fly to a country that was more or less reasonably contained in terms of the pandemic was one thing, but to fly to places that were exploding in terms of the numbers. And you and I are privileged to live in Austria, where so far the situation is under control. So the Austrians themselves, and rightly so, were very protective of their own health and safety situations. And I was also, as I am, responsible for the health and safety of my inspectors. You must also think what it meant, and it continues to be, that in some cases I sent teams that on arrival to country have to wait in a hotel room for 2 weeks until they can start the work. So I don't want to inundate you with all these problems, but I think it is and it has been an incredibly useful lesson learned in terms of continuity of inspection work and proliferation activity under extreme circumstances. So this is one angle of our work. Of course, the other thing I said would not stop would be the help we could be given to countries in this extraordinary circumstance. And what was quite amazing was that 123 countries. We are 171, as you know, 123 countries, and I include not less than 9 European countries. So this is not a north-south developing country versus developed country, etc., as one may imagine in the circumstances, having the frame of mind of the technical cooperation activity of the agency. All of these countries came to us for help. asking for help, basically in the form of nuclear-derived techniques for rapid diagnostic by providing tests, protective equipment, and RT-PCRs, which are machines, as you know, derived from nuclear techniques, which allow the operator to test many more in less time. Basically. So that was by far, historically, the largest, biggest assistance operation mounted by the agency. Again, in very complicated circumstances. You are, the head of an institution, and you know how difficult in general is to procure anything in any circumstance. Can you imagine what was for our procurement teams to go out in a world market that was completely disrupted by RT-PCRs, prepare the deliveries, send them to places where the, take any famous brand of international transporter that you may think about, where those people were not very enthusiastic about flying. So all of this quite clearly posed these enormous challenges, and I think brought as an interesting additional point for reflection a situation in terms of its physical presence of the IAEA for the first time in history at the center of the solution of our global health crisis. We are best known as a nuclear watchdog. And the technical cooperation that we do is basically known by some of the practitioners, but not the big public. Because of the importance of what we were doing, the IAEA was for the first time admitted to the UN COVID-19 crisis management team, where I was exchanging with WHO, with the Secretary General and others, the information we had, the assessments we had, and we're cooperating. This continues. This is work that is continuing. So this is I would say a description that indicates that in spite of this crisis, as it always happens, I think it's a cliche, but it's true that crisis means opportunity. And we were able to reach out far. We were able to start helping many more countries as we had been in the past. So much so that now I just presented an initiative on zoonotic diseases. Participants may be interested to know that the IAEA has a long tradition of work with FAO on zoonotic diseases, which is precisely what COVID-19 is, as was SARS, and as was MERS, as was Zika, chikungunya, dengue, and all of these things that happen with concerning regularity and increasing gravity. So we are now preparing a zoonotic disease integrated action package on which we are working with our member states. Another issue that I would not like to overlook in my description, after talking to you and the participants a little bit about safeguards and also the cooperation and assistance, is the issue of nuclear safety and security, which is so important for all of us. And I know VCDMP has been working on these issues for so long. I must say that from the beginning of the crisis, we also understood that the safe operation and secure protection of nuclear material would also be important, and the IAEA should be seen as very present at that moment. This is why we rapidly developed and piloted an international peer-to-peer network called NPP COVID Operational Experience Network, OPEX network, which operated daily and was receiving reports on safety and security from all the operators that are manning nuclear facilities around the world. We also maintained and conducted specific exercises on emergency response during that time to precisely to test the ability of our counterparts to respond in these circumstances. We were confronted, like in any other country, with reduced shifts, with people who would be telecommuting, working from home, including security personnel and safety personnel. So it was indispensable for us to be able to test the responsiveness and the capacity of the network of safety and security as we know it to be up to the task. Our conclusions on all of these things we try to summarize in a number of reports that are public, by the way, for those who may care to read and to get into more detail about these things that I'm describing in very, very general terms at this moment. We presented a number of reports to the board of governors, and we are going to update and present them again to the general conference, so there is public knowledge about all these things. So perhaps I should stop here. And I'm sorry if I took a bit too long. There's a lot that could be said. But one thing that we can be proud of is the professionalism with which the people that the IAEA, the staff members, the technicians, the technologists, the general staff personnel showed during this period, since they knew that they had a mission that could simply not be stopped. Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you, Rafael, very much. I really appreciate you both sharing the stories and even some little anecdotes of how you were able to deal with some of the challenges that the agency faced and how responsive the countries were and the governors and member states' support for it. There are already many questions that are people posing to the Q&A section, where they want to learn more about various responses and some current challenges, yes. But we'll save it for the Q&A session.
Okay.
And for now, I would appreciate if we go to Ambassador Natividad for her remarks. Please take the virtual screen and microphone.
Thank you very much. Director General Rafael Grossi, VCDNP Executive Director Elena, Sokova, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my honor and pleasure to speak today about the Philippine experience and the IAEA's role in addressing COVID-19 pandemic. I thank the VCDNP under the able leadership of Executive Director Sokova for inviting me to join the distinguished panel, and also for ensuring gender balance and geographic representation in today's discussion. We have all learned at this point that not one country is spared from the scourge of COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippines reported its first suspected COVID-19 case in January 2020. At the time, the Philippines had no testing capabilities, and specimens had to be sent to Australia for confirmation. On January 28 this year, the Department of Health, the agency at the forefront of managing the COVID-19 situation in the Philippines, convened the first meeting of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases. Since then, this task force had been providing recommendations to the Office of the President on various aspects of the Philippines' local COVID response. The Philippines reported its first confirmed case in January this year, and in the first week of March, local transmission of the disease was ascertained. Since then, community quarantine and social distancing measures have been strictly in place. Stricter enhanced community quarantine, where was imposed on the most populous cities like Manila and Cebu. And specific travel measures were imposed as early as January this year, even before the implementation of general entry restrictions that started last March. To expand our RT-PCR testing capacity, the government launched last April the Public-Private Task Force T3 strategy. T3 meaning test, trace, and treat. Despite these measures, COVID-19 has not shown any signs of abating in my country. The Philippines, with a population of approximately 110 million, recorded, as of this week, 59,000 cases. This number continues to climb. There are around 36,000 active cases, 27,000 recoveries, and sadly 1,600 deaths from the COVID virus. The economic and social costs of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines have been unfortunately staggering. Gross domestic products ranked by 0.2% during the first quarter of 2020, the first contraction for my country since 1998. Schools, restaurants, and places of worship were temporarily shut down. Millions lost their jobs, and incidents of gender-based sexual harassment have sadly been reported. Meanwhile, we have repatriated to the Philippines more than 68,000 overseas Filipino workers since the pandemic started. These challenges have nevertheless encouraged the Philippine government to exert extra effort in the hope of finding solutions to the problems arising from COVID-19. The Philippines has looked forward towards its neighbors and friends in the international community. We appealed for their support to the Philippine government's efforts to augment the country's technical capacities. We have coordinated with international financial institutions such as the Asian Development Bank that provided a grant for the creation of a pandemic subnational reference laboratory in an urban center outside Manila. And of course, with the international organizations, particularly the IAEA. At this juncture, please allow me to highlight the IAEA's significant role in helping to augment the Philippines' COVID-19 testing capabilities during the time when my country needed it most. In March 2020, the Philippine Secretary of Health sent an official request to the IAEA seeking the agency's assistance in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, to which the IAEA responded immediately and favorably. This was followed by close coordination between our permanent mission here in Vienna and the IAEA Department of Technical Cooperation to make the necessary logistical arrangements. Our foreign ministers, no less, who is very much appreciative of the IAEA's assistance, tweeted twice in his much followed tweet about this strong partnership. The IAEA's technical assistance package contains equipment and materials for a nuclear-derived technique we already know as the RT-PCR, or the real-time reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction, which remains today the gold standard in COVID testing, since it detects the presence of the actual virus itself. The single most important equipment in the IAEA assistance package is the thermocycler itself, the very equipment needed to perform the RT-PCR test. This equipment is capable of rapidly cycling through different temperatures to enable the simultaneous amplification and quantification of COVID genetic material. This machine is what facilitates the actual detection of COVID itself. But when the pandemic started, very few facilities in the Philippines have thermocyclers. At the cost of 15 to 20,000 euros per thermocycler, a developing country such as mine is financially constrained to mass procure the equipment. The IAEA's assistance will help us increase and improve our testing capacity, especially in densely populated cities. So far, the Philippines has received 2 units of thermocyclers, with 2 more approved, and hopefully more can be supported by the project. In addition, the package contains various chemical solutions, reagents, and enzymes needed to facilitate the RT-PCR technique, which have to be imported into the Philippines since these IAEA specified materials are not locally produced. The package also includes ancillary laboratory equipment and supplies needed to perform basic molecular biology techniques such as biosafety cabinets, microcentrifuges, vortices, pipettes and pipette tips, tubes and vials, and personal protective equipment such as gloves. Furthermore, the Philippines also received a mobile X-ray which may be used by healthcare providers to identify and characterize pulmonary abnormalities caused by the disease. DG Grossi, I know you're listening. It appears that the only thing missing from the package is the actual laboratory building itself. And so I take this opportunity to thank you, DG Grossi, and your hardworking team for tirelessly working even at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, all while observing work from home arrangements to ensure the timely delivery to states in most urgent need. The Philippines would also like to thank the donors which supported the agency's COVID-19 response for their generous extra budgetary and in-kind contributions. As DG Grossi has already mentioned, there have been a few challenges in the delivery of equipment, a result of the global shutdown of many business operations, including airlines and other transportation providers, and border closures. We appreciate that the agency continues to find ways to work around these limitations. As an example, we had an airline carrier turn down the shipment of the mobile X-ray due to the size of the lithium batteries, which are considered dangerous goods. However, as soon as the agency was informed of this issue, they were able to promptly make alternative arrangements to deliver this much needed equipment. On another note, the Philippines is also humbled on its part to have played a minor role in the agency's COVID-19 response, which is being delivered under the Technical Cooperation Interregional Project INT0098, which is the strengthening capabilities of member states in building, strengthening, and restoring capacities and services in case of outbreaks, emergencies, and disasters. The Philippines, as the rapporteur of the Technical Assistance and Cooperation Committee in November last year, facilitated the approval of the agency's Technical Cooperation Program for 2020-21, which includes this specific project on emergency response. It is most gratifying for us to witness on a grand scale the concrete and direct impact of policymaking decisions at the IAEA, resulting in tangible benefits for member states. The IAEA's assistance makes use of nuclear and nuclear-derived techniques to detect COVID-19, thereby demonstrating the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and its beneficial applications in medicine and health. As the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, one such beneficial application is the detection of zoonotic diseases that have potentially catastrophic impacts on human health and society. In this regard, the Philippines wishes to express its full support for IAEA's Zodiac initiative, which aims to strengthen member states' capabilities in surveillance, early detection, and intervention against re-emerging zoonotic diseases. With the agency's proven track record under DG Grossi of building partnerships and mobilizing resources, as well as the expertise in isotopic and biotechnology techniques, the IAEA is indeed well placed to facilitate global efforts in responding to such disease outbreak. And in closing, the Philippines wishes to express once again that its deep appreciation to the IAEA for its technical assistance to many countries around the world in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking forward, the Philippines will work closely with the agency as it implements the Zodiac, a forward-looking initiative to ensure that states are well equipped to respond to future disease outbreaks. When it comes to global pandemics, it is imperative to build the capacity of every country, for we are only as strong as our weakest link. And with this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Natividad. Thank you also for providing such a detailed account of all the various equipment and assistance provided to the Philippines. And I sincerely wish your country to be successful in beating up the virus, and hopefully things start to go down in terms of the number of new cases, and we all will be looking for each other around the globe, how things are developing, and hopefully there will be additional projects focused on the economic development and peaceful uses that can help actually overcome some of the economic impact. But we'll get to that in the Q&A, hopefully. And now it is my pleasure to give the virtual floor to Ambassador David Hall. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. And let me start by thanking you, Elena, for giving me the opportunity to speak at this webinar today. I look forward to the interesting discussion. I should start by saying that the United Kingdom appreciates very much the work of VCDMP and recognise the important role it does in bringing people together to discuss and share expertise on nuclear and proliferation issues here in Vienna and beyond. This is particularly important while the COVID-19 pandemic continues, and it's good to take opportunities like this to come together and celebrate the success of the response to COVID-19 so far in the context of the IAEA and consider the lessons to be learned from such a challenging situation. I'd like to start by extending the United Kingdom's thanks to Director General Grossi and all the IAEA staff for how they've risen to the challenge of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. They really have gone to extraordinary lengths, often in very challenging circumstances, to ensure that the vital operations of the agency have continued uninterrupted. It's a huge credit to you, Rafael, to your leadership and to the resilience and professionalism of IAEA staff that the agency's core activities, such as nuclear safeguards verification, have taken place despite the imposition of distancing measures and severe restrictions on international travel. Stepping back slightly, the United Kingdom is a strong supporter of the work of the IAEA more generally. Its work, whether preventing proliferation of nuclear and radioactive material or assisting member states achieving their development goals, this contributes to making all of our lives better and safer. And that is why the UK is a big contributor, both financially and for technical support across all of the agency's programs. We provide extra support to agency safeguards work, and we are the second biggest member state contributor to the Nuclear Security Fund, contributing over £30 million since 2015. We also pay our contribution to the agency's Technical Cooperation Fund in full and on time. That's nearly £4 million in 2019. And we do provide significant extra budgetary support, around €5 million to the agency's development focused work over the last 4 years. So one of the areas the United Kingdom is particularly interested going forward with the agency is the work to combat climate change. In 2021, the United Kingdom will host the rescheduled COP26, and we recognise the important role that nuclear energy and applications play in ensuring we're meeting our climate targets. And we look forward to further discussions on this in the run-up to COP26. And maybe, Elena, I could be cheeky enough to say maybe this is a future VCDMP event in the making. The coronavirus is an unprecedented global challenge, and those affected are not merely statistics, but they're people. They're people with friends and family. It affects our health, but it also affects our economic activity because of the measures that are in place. And so the United Kingdom is determined to support and strengthen the global response to COVID-19. And we have a long-standing record of supporting countries to prepare for disease outbreaks. We've pledged up to €850 million of UK aid to combat the coronavirus pandemic, including 145 million for UN coronavirus appeals. And on the 4th of June, we hosted the Global Vaccine Summit, which raised €7.8 billion to support health systems to withstand the impact of coronavirus and maintain the infrastructure necessary to roll out a future COVID-19 vaccine on a global scale. And we will continue to play a leading role in maximizing international cooperation to defeat COVID-19. The IAEA is also playing an integral role in the global response. The United Kingdom was pleased to see that the IAEA joined the UN response to COVID-19 as a member of the WHO-led crisis management team. For us, ensuring the best possible coordination between all the UN agencies is crucial in order to ensure the most effective response to the pandemic. We would like to see the IAEA further integrated into the UN system-wide approaches to health, food, ocean management, and development assistance in the country. As part of our overall response with the IAEA to the pandemic, the United Kingdom was pleased to be able to support in 3 ways. 1, by ensuring vital safeguards work could continue. 2, by sharing experience and learning of our own civil nuclear sector. And 3, by contributing to the IAEA's rapid response to member state need for diagnostic technology. So let me take these in turn briefly. The United Kingdom places the utmost importance on our own safeguards obligations and the role that the IAEA plays more generally in safeguards verification. The new realities of COVID-19 pandemic have included public health measures, including flight restrictions and periods of mandatory self-isolation. And these have the potential to severely impact the agency's activities, particularly around safeguards verification work. That is why we worked with the authorities in the United Kingdom to provide an exemption for mandatory self-isolation, specifically for IAEA inspectors when on duty in the UK, to ensure that they could carry out their inspections without undue delay. It's also why we joined forces with France and Germany to collectively provide €750,000 for IAEA charter flights to facilitate inspections, including to Iran. These steps help to ensure that the IAEA inspectors could carry out important work uninterrupted. Secondly, we have also supported the agency's efforts to share information and experiences amongst member states. Many aspects of this crisis are unprecedented, and it's incredibly important that member states are able to learn from one another in tackling these new challenges. As such, the United Kingdom has shared our experiences of how to maintain safety and security of our nuclear sites through IAEA networks, and this includes the IAEA's new COVID-19 OPEX network. These have been important channels for experts to share expertise, and we will continue to share our experiences of regulators and industry to ensure collectively that the nuclear industry is in the best possible place to continue operating effectively and safely throughout the pandemic. In September at the General Conference, the United Kingdom will build on this sharing of expertise by hosting a side event on delivering nuclear security in times of crisis in partnership with King's College London. This will capture and share lessons learned by the UK and other experiences in maintaining nuclear security under COVID-19, and also look at some historic crises as well. We'll follow this up with a handbook of case studies and recommendations for policymakers and practitioners. We have also continued to work closely with respective divisions in the agency to ensure activities can continue. For example, we transferred our latest £1.5 million to the Nuclear Security Fund in March, early in the pandemic, and we work closely with the Nuclear Security Division to ensure that they have the tools and funding required to reprioritize their work and shift towards delivering more training virtually. And finally, the United Kingdom was pleased to contribute €574,000 towards the agency's important efforts to respond to the pandemic and to member states' need by increasing the capacity of member states to diagnose COVID-19 through the use of RT-PCR technology. This nuclear-derived technique is an important example of the benefits of the applications of nuclear technologies, providing fast, reliable results which will prevent the virus spreading, and this potentially could save millions of lives around the world. Through this program, the IAEA has demonstrated its ability to respond rapidly to emerging and unprecedented challenges, showing flexibility and creativity. It has built new partnerships with international organizations and demonstrated the relevance of nuclear technologies to tackling global problems and deliver much needed support to member states. And as the IAEA continues to work to respond to the challenges we face as a global community, the United Kingdom is encouraged by the announcement of Rafael, the Director General's new Zodiac initiative, which seeks to increase capacity to respond to future outbreaks of zoonotic diseases. Of course, COVID-19 is still going on and there are many future challenges to face. The financial impact of COVID-19 on member states will be severe, and it will be important for the agency to think about how it will mitigate the impact of this through new, more efficient ways of working. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the urgent need to address gender equality and women's economic empowerment. The pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women and girls. That's why I'm pleased to see that despite the impact of COVID-19, the Director General remains committed to reaching gender parity within the IAEA. And as an international gender champion, I will continue to champion and support the IAEA's gender diversity initiatives, including through supporting opportunities that stem from flexible working and the use of digital tools to bring more female participants into the IAEA and their discussions. There may be extended periods where international travel will be limited, and the agency should consider how best to facilitate continued fruitful exchanges between member states that ensure that we continue to learn from one another. The United Kingdom supports the work of the Director General, the Board Chair, and the Secretariat to ensure that the governance arrangements of the agency have continued despite COVID-19. It was an impressive achievement to hold the first ever virtual meeting of the Board of Governors, with over 300 participants taking part in the 6 official UN languages. And we look forward to the General Conference in September with the understanding that it will look a bit different this year, but also noting that important decisions in relation to the governance of the agency still need to be taken. In closing, the UK reiterates its appreciation for the work of the IEA, including how it's risen to the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic. The cooperation of all member states will remain critical, and the UK will support Director General Grossi and his team to ensure that it can operate effectively despite the uncertainty and all the challenges that will remain ahead. Rafael, you can be assured of the United Kingdom and my support. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That's, I'm sure not only the IAEA and Director General Grossi appreciates the support the UK provided during that time, but many people around the world are appreciative of the assistance that you provide to the agency and to its various streams of work. And your points about some more efficient ways of going forward, about better integration with the UN system and others are really, really excellent proposals. And maybe we'll have a little bit of a discussion among the 3 of you about some of the lessons learned from the current situation and how these lessons could be applied in the future. Before, however, we jump into the Q&A, I want to remind our viewers that in order to post questions, please use the Zoom. Those who are joining us through Zoom, post your questions to Q&A function under the button is at the bottom of the screen. For those who are listening and viewing us through YouTube, please send your questions to events@vcdnp.org. And one thing that I need to make an announcement is before we move to the questions, is that Ambassador Hall unfortunately will have to leave a little bit earlier than the suggested end of the webinar. So if there are specific questions to him, it would be great if those asking these questions identified in their questions. And in general, if you wish to ask one of the panelists, it would be better if you note who you address the question to. But without further ado, I really want to thank all the 3 of you. I think it's a very interesting discussion, excellent examples of the work, but there are more sometimes questions as you speak, they generate. And I see a series of questions are already been popping up about they are mostly to you, Director General Grossi, with regards to the preparedness of the agency before the COVID. Did you have any of the measures for various emergency contingency in advance? Of course, no one could predict it, but were there any already existing plans, like what to, how to act, what to do in case of some unexpected developments and crises? There was also a question regarding how you have highlighted the work that in cooperation you had with the member states, and with some international organizations. The question is coming, how was your cooperation, and was there any with the regional organizations, including regional safeguards organizations? That would be a second question. For maybe the three of you, for the panelists, one of the questions that is coming is, what lessons from the pandemic can the IAEA take into its normal operations, particularly specific to the safeguards and the technical cooperation? And what kind of lessons, like everybody's learning in terms of the work at the agency in some of these areas, and what member states are learning, how they're thinking about operationalize, forget about it, that word, how to use some of the experience and the new modalities that you've learned going forward. So I will first give the floor to you, Rafael, and then maybe we'll see how it goes. And David, maybe afterwards, given that he plans to leave soon. Rafael, please. Please unmute yourself. You are on mute.
Excuse me. No, I was simply saying if Ambassador Hall has another commitment, maybe you can start with him. I don't have a problem. On the contrary.
What I suggest you go first, Rafael. I think the centerpiece is the agency's planning. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much, and for the questions. I think in terms the first one, the issue of whether we had anything in place or any preparedness for what happened. The answer would be, in general terms, yes, because not for something of this magnitude, of course, but as an organization that deals with something as sensitive as inspections and also nuclear safety, security, operations like this, we have very robust schemes for what we call in the jargon business continuity. Business continuity that many institutions have, sometimes more related to other sorts of problems, sometimes even linked to IT interruptions or shortages, power shortages, and things like that, and how to operate under those circumstances. In the case of the inspections, we always have a number of alternative plans in terms of deployment also of our people, since it is obvious that we may be confronted with circumstances with teams may be isolated for quite a while, or we may not have the ability to replace them, or they've been stopped for much longer, since not so many countries are as generous as the United Kingdom in allowing inspectors to proceed to work immediately. In some other places, they do need to stay in quarantine for many, many days, so which makes them unavailable for the work they need to do. So we had a number of initial measures in place, but we had to adapt them, because what we had is a situation where the whole of the institution moved very quickly on. I took the decision on Friday, March the 13th. As you can see, I remember it because it was a very crucial day, and we had to have a number of things in place. So as of Monday, the 16th of March, we would be fully operational without a single person here in the office. So that was the big challenge. But I would say, in general, an organization like this has always backup plans. Perhaps what was unique in this case was that we had to make the transitory in nature semi-permanent, I would say, because the extent of time quite clearly stretched, and we were basically following the health guidance and recommendation from the Austrian federal government, so which has adopted a system of a bi-weekly reassessment in terms of lightening up or relaxing measures. So we did have that. The second issue was on the cooperation with other institutions and regional inspectorates and institutions. In general, as I said, we started almost immediately participating, I myself as executive chief, with in a number of meetings like this with the UN or international organization leadership writ large, where we were, as I was saying, exchanging ideas and even needs. In my case, for example, on certain occasions, I reached out to the United Nations and to the Secretary General, since we were having trouble in putting some teams in certain places. And of course, through the field support operation mechanisms of the United Nations, this was an alternative. We were never forced to use that, and we could do with our private flights, but on a couple of occasions that became an issue, because even private flights were not admitted to some areas that have other security, even military challenges. And in terms of regional institutions, I would say that yes, we continued our cooperation. Euratom stopped its activities, but ABAC did not. For example, the Argentine-Brazilian Agency for Accountability and Control of Nuclear Material, and we were able to work together. Including by giving them transportation, for example, in cases where they had to, apart from our own inspectors, move either to and from Brazil or Argentina. So that was a nice example where we were working together. In terms of what we can take from all of this into the regular operations, I would say there are a lot of lessons being learned. We are still processing that. As you know, as in any other activity, there is all this discussion and hype about the new normal, whether there is a new normal and we are not going to be needing to see each other anymore, and we will always be working through screens as we are doing now. I think that is a bit exaggerated, and it's too early to say, but it is clear that even if all these technologies that we are using now existed, we, by having been forced in a way to use them, we were able to extract from them a lot of use. And in some cases, for example, when we were sending the equipment, the detection equipment, we had to conduct lots of training and instructions virtually, which worked pretty well. And this allowed us to think that in some cases where we have shortages of budget or funds, we can reach out to other member states easier. So these are my relatively short answers to the three questions.
Thank you, Rafael. And in order to give Ambassador Hall a bit of time to provide his final remarks and response to some of the earlier questions, I'll give him the floor now, and then we'll resume the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. Apologies once again for needing to go earlier, but I think I thought Rafael hit the nail on the head, really. I mean, there's a lot of hype about the new normal, but I mean, basically the contingencies will evolve, and some of them will evolve and become new ways of working. And I think it's clear that we've had to learn to use IT. We've had to learn other processes in the way we interact, in the way we work, and how we think. And I think that's normal. That's how life goes when different contexts appear. And I think one of the important things is that there will be an economic impact of this pandemic. And so it's really, really important that we try and use these elements that we've learned, and some that we've learned are actually quite useful and quite effective, to help mitigate some of the economic impacts that will come. I can't predict exactly how it will go, and I don't think we should be too much of a doom monger about these things, but I do think that it's almost inevitable that member states will need to tighten their belts. And it's also inevitable that we will be able to find new ways of working which may be more efficient. And it's only sensible that we try and build on that learning and use it in an effective way. So I think the message I would say is let's think about what we've learned and how we can use not just IT, but also just ways of working and ways of communicating to work in a more efficient and effective way. And let's not be scared of working. And let's accept that this will help us in meeting some of the financial challenges which will almost certainly come down the line. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, David. I much appreciate your remarks and comments and your participation in the webinar. And I would, like, as long as you are able to stay, would be greatly welcome. But I would like now to give the floor to Ambassador Natividad. Please, Marie.
Yeah. So thank you very much for giving me the floor to just quickly respond as far as my country is concerned. I think that for us, the pandemic has underscored the need of a quick and rapid response, the need for close coordination between the agency and national governments, as well as regional and international organizations, to meet mobilization of resources, partnerships. And so I then would like to just reiterate again, these are reasons why the Philippines is the Zodiac project. We do not have to reinvent the wheel when we undertake the Zodiac initiative, but we could always just utilize existing and technical financial resources that are already available. What is important here is the close coordination between what national governments have already, international and regional organizations, because we really cannot predict when is the next outbreak of the pandemic. And also for my country, this pandemic has been an eye-opener to what IAEA is, its mandate, and what it stands for, and its relevance. Through the pandemic and this intense cooperation that we had with the IAEA, I would say that the greater part of the Filipinos are now has been more informed about the critical role that the IAEA plays and what my country can benefit for it, especially that of IAEA's role in promoting world safety, security, and looking after the development of its member states. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Much appreciated. Now I will ask a couple of additional questions and pose them to Rafael. Obviously, there are many questions related to the safeguards implementation during the pandemic, and some of them relate to some of the questions that are asked. Obviously, focus on were there any challenges that you were not able or still not able to overcome? Are there any specific kind of hard cases? The second is related, and there are a number of actually questions related to the implementation of the inspections in Iran, particularly with regards to the recent incident on Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility. And according to the media assessment, it was allegedly sabotaged or cyber attacked, and the facility suffered a significant damage. So could you please brief on the status of the facility and, if possible, the incident itself? Could you also please share your thoughts on the implications for the safeguards implementation of this incident? Another question that is related to the above question is, in general, like, how are you addressing the cooperation or sometimes lack of in the implementation of the JCPOA verification measures and regular obligations on the safeguards agreements with the agency? So these are specific questions about some difficult cases related to whatever countries, and to Iran specifically. Please. You're muted, Rafael. Please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow the instructions, and then I remembered how to unfollow them. In terms of the safeguards activities, I would say that to a direct question whether we were not able to solve a problem, I would say fortunately not. We were able to solve most of them, but they continue to appear. So I don't want to sound neither pessimistic nor optimistic. Every week we have an issue, and sometimes new issues, because the pandemic evolves differently, and the politics behind the pandemics is, a matter for analysts. And I don't want to speculate into that. But suffice to say it, and I'm sure that all of you will understand what I'm saying. So in many countries there are issues. In some countries that are included, I must say that, included in some countries that are well known, respected, and recognized, but they are sterling fulfillment of their safeguards obligations. But this is completely different. This is why we need to engage in these political conversations sometimes, because they feel that what they are doing takes absolute precedence, and that when they, after sometimes very often very difficult internal political debates, come to a decision, then they don't want to start making exceptions. And then we have to come and explain why they have to make an exception with us. And we are not only an exception, but we are an exception of foreigners who are coming into countries at a time where all the sensitivities are, very enhanced and I would say exacerbated. It's the word I was fighting to find. Exacerbated. So it's our daily work. We are every day trying to solve these cases. Why? And I wanted to say it again. Why measures like the one taken in London to understand that our inspectors are coming. They are coming with health certificates, and the measures should not be applied blindly to them, and not freeze a team of inspectors. Our best capital is our people, is our inspectors. We have these incredibly talented people, and I have them in hotel rooms. So this is and it's very difficult for them. You can imagine what this could be for anybody of us. We leave home, our families concerned that we are traveling, then we arrive to a place, we stay in a hotel room. In some cases, we were confronted with situations that host countries did not allow the inspectors to leave the rooms of the hotels. I want to bring this an anecdote so people understand that there are human stories behind this. So this is the long answer to the question about the hard cases. We are solving one by one. In the case of Iran, I must say, and I put it in my report, I was very grateful, and I'm very grateful that they understood that it was very, very important that the inspection work, setting aside what political differences may exist or technical differences that may exist, that the effort should continue, and that we should not add yet another layer of complication to a situation which is extremely sensitive. And I praised them for that, because they understood, like Austria did when they said, okay, you need to do this, let's see how we do it. And we had some negotiations and some protocols were negotiated with them and with Iran. So the cooperation in this sense continued. In the case of Natanz, I think the agency has been out on record saying that we were informed of the incident. I would not be referring myself to the incident. It's for the Iranian government and authorities, since this is an internal matter of security in Iran. What I can say is that our inspectors are regularly present at this site. As you know, it's Natanz, which figures among the facilities that we regularly visit. So we were able to be there, and our activities continue there.
Thank you, Rafael. Just a clarification, but were the IAEA inspectors also in that particular facility or just on that Natanz site? Just quick clarification.
Yeah, there is some limitation as to what I can say in publicly, because these are inspections. I can say that we were allowed there and we were there.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I have a specific question for Ambassador Natividad, because you mentioned that working with the Asian Development Bank, among other international organizations, do you think there is a need and prospect for cooperation between the IAEA and developmental agencies such as the Asian Development Bank and maybe some others in implementing and supporting projects related to health and other issues, and in general in the area of the peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology? And for you, Rafael, is one of the questions. It's probably an easy one, and you can quickly answer that. Is many of the viewers are interested in where they can find information, like how many countries were provided with the various assistance in testing equipment and some other related to the COVID-19, and whether you have it public somewhere on the website. And sort of related question to you also, Rafael, related in terms of the impact of the COVID-19 will certainly be a constraining factor on the budgets that the countries can spare towards both the international organizations, and there may be extra budgetary contributions. And what are your plans and thoughts on how would you go about ensuring that the assistance provided by the agency, particularly in the technical cooperation area and the other peaceful uses applications, is not only continues at the level, but maybe expands? Like, what are the strategies you're looking at? So first we'll ask Ambassador Natividad to answer the question, and then Rafael, I'll give you the floor to answer these questions. Maria, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the question regarding the possibility of IAEA coordinating with international financing institutions. Perhaps the DG can also better answer this question, but I believe that IAEA already has experience in coordinating projects on a regional basis, for instance, with ADB and also the IDB. And I think that this close coordination and interaction would be necessary. This is for purposes of synchronizing projects and efforts so that there is no duplication, and also the expertise of one agency could be matched, for instance, by the resources and capability also of the financing institution. I know that, for instance, with the ADB, the previous Director General had meetings, and there were efforts also to mobilize resources for regional projects, such as, for instance, in the case of in Asia, efforts to address the cancer issues. So I do believe that there is great benefit that could be derived if we closely coordinate our resources and abilities. And also, again, if I may mention, this is the critical aspect, that is would ensure the success of Zodiac. So, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ambassador. Very good points. Rafael, now the floor goes to you for the questions that I proposed.
Thank you. Now I'm not muted. So on information about the assistance in COVID, as I said, we issued reports that have been made public. There is one here. But apart from this, which could be a bit more technical and boring, there is a lot of material in our web pages about it. But let me say that, as to give you a rough idea, this operation involved 123 countries. It involved 416 shipments. 416 shipments of equipment. We have covered already 100 countries, and we still have some in transit. And we are dealing now with here we can say the second wave of requests, because after the first wave of assistance that we were able to deliver, since the situation continued and in some cases worsened, or because of the effectiveness of the support, some countries have requested us, please, to continue and to give us more. This is why we have continued with Zodiac and other initiatives here. And I jump to your other question, which is about the finance of all of this. Here, I think we are confronted with a bit of a paradox, because when it comes to what the world is doing in terms of COVID and the associated actions to assistance through international organizations, we see that the resources abound. The resources exist. They are there. I was making a rough calculation the other day on the amounts that have been pledged to deal with this internationally, and I'm not mentioning here what is going on internally in each of our countries, and we can easily approach the figure of 20 billion US dollars. 20 billion US dollars have been pledged, in disbursed in some cases, partially or not completely. But the IAEA is struggling. We had a first wave of support. We were able to raise around 27 million US dollars, which was, I had the details in my reports. There were very generous contributions from a number of countries, but we need, frankly, much more. What we have done is, frankly, a drop in the ocean. Let's say, imagine that what we are doing is, let me take the case of Iran, where we have been sending RT-PCRs. They have 40 million people, 30 provinces, and they need at least one in every province, or in countries in South America, as you can imagine, which is the other, unfortunately, in my part of the world, one of the other epicenters of the pandemic. So what we've done is, frankly, very little. We have helped. We are continuing that help, but we need much more. And my difficulty here is that in some governments, and I'm in conversation, and of course, Ambassador Natividad is helping me, Ambassador Hall, all the governors are helping. People in national bureaucracies tend to put the IAEA in a box, which has to do more and is much more related to the nuclear watchdog function, which I do not renege from. On the contrary, I say sometimes people say, no, we are not. We are a nuclear watchdog. We are the inspectors. We have to be tough inspectors. But at the same time, we do all these other things. And sometimes we struggle in getting to the people who are behind the decision making. So it's an uphill battle. we are doing it. We are presenting a number of projects and needs based on the requests of our member states. What we are trying, my message is that they need to understand that the agency is a lean and mean institution that has more than 60 years of work with the scientists and technologists. We know who to help. We know how to do it. We know the labs. We have, for example, by the way, the vet lab, the only existing network of veterinary labs in the world, with around 280 labs with which we are in contact. And they are telling us, they are saying that they need this support, and that, of course, it is a very serious situation. So we are working on all these fronts, but it's a challenge, like you say. There is another related problem, which I think is going to be affecting all international organizations in terms of the assessed contributions, of course, because many, in particular developing countries, are going and are already now facing very dire financial situations. And I can predict that this year and perhaps next year, the UN common system, allow me to dare to say that from the IAEA, will be facing serious problems in getting the money that is needed for their operations.
Thank you, Rafael, for being candid and for forthcoming on many of these issues. If I may, we're almost done with the webinar, and I received a number of questions and actually a number of comments, actually commending the work of the agency during the pandemic. But there are still a number of questions that focus on the safeguards, and I would be remiss if I don't pose a question of my and your, Rafael, good friend, Laura Rockwood, who asks, will the pandemic impact on the IAEA's ability to draw safeguards conclusion for 2020 next year? And maybe we'll put a kind of a stop here for the questions.
Thank you, Elena. The answer to Laura is fortunately not. We are not going to have problems in reaching the conclusions because we have been able to continue precisely. Had we not done this, I think the next safeguards implementation report would have had a big question mark around it.
Perfect. That was a quick answer. And once again, I wanted to highlight that, I don't know, my team probably is copying the questions and chat functions. There are a number of less of a questions, but more comments about and words of appreciation of the work of the agency, but the appreciation of the support that many member states provided to it, and good wishes to you and all the countries in your work, and including in fighting the COVID. I myself would really want to extend my gratitude to both of you and to David, who had to leave early, for taking time to be engaged today with our broad audience on these very important issues related to both non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and the application of nuclear science and technology in both for health issues, for many other peaceful applications. And I hope we will continue to have a dialogue. If you remember, Rafael, in January, we hosted you just when you were just elected in the first seminar, and you had to run back to another meeting. And at that time, I promised that we'll have a session while you spend more time with us. And I really appreciate you keeping the word, but I hope we will continue the dialogue. And from myself, I want to both thank you, David, and wish the agency and its member states all the best in these trying times.
No, Elena, let me thank you. The issues that the agency deals with are not simple. We've covered some of them. They are in some cases a bit arcane and lend themselves sometimes to conflicting interpretations. So from us here at the agency, having people like you and your team there across the street, I think I'm looking at your building here. For us to have people like you helping to explain what the issues are is essential. We can do that much, but of course do it from the freedom of a platform of excellence like the VCDNP is of extreme importance. So I will always be available to discuss with you, and we will continue to have very challenging issues in front of us. This will require a public that has the right to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, much appreciated, and all the best to you. We'll probably now close down the channel, and as was said earlier, once we get out some of the technical parts and quirks out of the recording, it will be posted, and you'll see a link in our website. Thank you, everyone, including the participants, for their attention and great questions. Thank you.
Bye-bye.